What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to the SI Sooners podcast. Talked to Lincoln Riley yesterday. Bob Stoops is back. No big deal. We'll get to that coming up in just a bit. But Parker, Lincoln didn't get one question about Baylor yesterday. 25-minute press conference, not one question. That's who OU plays on Saturday, by the way. The Baylor Bears. Remember them? Not one question, Parker.
Well, John, I think that just kind of speaks to the quality of the opponent. If you'll recall, the week that Kansas came to town, Riley didn't really field any questions about Kansas. And you also got to take into account the fact that there's so much else going on with this program right now. I mean, they had Bob Stoops come out of retirement, which we'll get to in a bit. They have, obviously, coming off the heels of a COVID-19 postponement for the first time all season. And it seems like they're still having some issues with it this week. Lincoln Riley was non-committal on Monday when he was asked whether the game was going to be played on Saturday, which right now we don't have any reason to think it won't be played, but we're very much aware when Oklahoma released the new testing data, 35 positive cases, as opposed to, I believe it was single digits last week. So you're starting to see a spike within the athletic department. So Oklahoma's working through some things. And, you know, as much as you want to be able to focus all of your attention and all of your energy on the opponent, you got to worry about everything else that's going on within the program and outside the program as well at the same time.
I'm John Hoover. I'm in Tulsa. Parker Thune, he's over in Norman. Appreciate you guys, as always, listening to the SI Sooners podcast. Appreciate y'all watching on my YouTube channel. We are a Fan Nation affiliate, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. Check out our redesigned website. It's big time. Same address, allsooners.com. Same great content, but it's got a whole new look, brand new presentation. It is slick. It is icy. It is all that good stuff. Listen, I think people love it. People who are going there, I think they love it. And I mean love it, because our traffic these last 4, 5, 6 days has just been blowing up, setting records literally every day for traffic. So we appreciate you all. We were the #1 college network on the SI website for most of the football season, and 3 of the last 4 days we have just shattered our own traffic numbers. So, you know, get you got to say we must be doing something right? So check it out, allsooners.com. Also, however you're listening today, please subscribe to this podcast so you will know every time we post a new one, and every Sunday and Wednesday is when we post. So, other than that one little question on Monday, I believe, during the Big 12 coaches call, Lincoln Riley didn't get to talk about Baylor at all this week, so we're going to hook you guys up. Matt Rule didn't leave much behind when he went to the Carolina Panthers. Baylor graduated a bunch of dudes, including, to me, a bunch of dudes on what was widely considered, and especially by me as well, the Big 12's best defense last year. Those guys were so good. So Baylor taps LSU, hires their defensive coordinator. Y'all remember him from Atlanta, Dave Aranda. So I imagine Dave Aranda is going to be fairly familiar with Lincoln Riley's schemes after he prepped for OU for 3 weeks last year ahead of, the playoff game. But like I said, Baylor, they graduated just a bunch of guys, and they started this year kind of all over the board COVID-wise. I think they had like 4 games postponed, scheduled, rescheduled, moved around. They opened the season, they beat the crap out of Kansas, and they lost 5 straight Big 12 games. They lose a close game at West Virginia. They lost by 11, I think, at Texas. They lost by 10 against TCU. They lost by a touchdown at Iowa State. And then they lost by 1 point, 24-23 at Texas Tech. I think you see maybe a trend starting here, in that they're not maybe as bad as their record says they are. Bill Parcells' record is what you are, what your record says you are. I get that, but these guys, they're like Oklahoma. They're getting better when you watch them play. Last week they fall behind big to Kansas State early, and then in about a quarter and a half they put it all together. Parker, Charlie Brewer had his best game of the year. Was Big 12 Player of the Week, won the Tyler Rose Earl Campbell National Player of the Week. Tristan Ebner went beast mode. Their defense held Kansas State to 88 yards passing. Their kicker made a walk-off field goal. They literally put it all together and played their best game of the year, Parker, with everything that Oklahoma's been through the past couple of weeks now. Is this a potential trap game for Oklahoma?
Well, it is, John, and there are several reasons for that. One, of course, you have to take into account Aranda's familiarity, as you mentioned, with Lincoln Riley's offensive scheme. And I don't think people realize how much more familiar a coach becomes with another coach's offensive scheme when he gets the chance to game plan for it, not just for 1 week over the course of the season, but an entire month, right? Dave Aranda had 3+ weeks to game plan for the Sooners leading into the Peach Bowl last year. So it's safe to say if there's a guy that knows Lincoln Riley's offense in and out, it's probably Dave Aranda. And there's a reason that Baylor brought Dave Aranda in. It's because they saw what their defense was able to accomplish with Matt Rule last year and say, you know what? We're going to try to establish a reputation. We're going to try to help change the narrative in the Big 12 in terms of what these defenses are capable of, and we're going to try to build a brand as one of the defensive powerhouses in college football. That's why you bring in the biggest of the defensive-minded candidates in last year's head coaching pool, and Dave Aranda from LSU, last year's national champions, obviously. So Aranda's familiarity, definitely have to take that into account. And as you mentioned, Baylor is a team that has not played as poorly as their record would indicate. And I think they share some similarities with Oklahoma in that regard, right? Because if you were evaluating the Sooners after the last 3 weeks, or after the first 3 weeks of the season, rather, you would have said, this team is a borderline top 25 team at best. Now we're sitting here 2 months later, and I don't think anybody in the nation would question that Oklahoma is definitively one of the top 10 most talented teams in the country and has a top 5 ceiling. This is a team that when they're firing on all cylinders, which they are right now, they can play with just about anybody. But not only do you have to take that into account, the fact that Baylor's a better team, as you mentioned, than their record would lead you to believe, and they've had plenty of close losses that bear that out. But Oklahoma is coming off an open date for the 4th time this season. And, you get the coach speak and you get all the players completely disavowing the notion that there's going to be a letdown on the heels of a bye week. But to go a week without playing and then come back and take care of business the way you're expected to do is never an easy thing, regardless of who the opponent on the other sideline is. And so, for Oklahoma, the task is very simple. Take care of business. Beat Baylor the way that the Sooners, as a top 12 team in the college football playoff rankings, the way that everyone expects the Sooners to beat Baylor. And so, with that in mind, there's an expectation. Now, I think there's beginning to become this expectation cultivated that maybe wasn't there over the first few weeks of this season because people weren't sure what kind of a team Oklahoma was. Now, I think everybody is pretty much on the same page in asserting that Oklahoma, if they're not the best team in the Big 12, definitely has the highest ceiling of any team in the Big 12, and when they're on, has the potential to play at a higher level than anybody in the Big 12. So it's a matter of, can Oklahoma not fall victim to the expectations that are piled upon them? Can they not fall victim to all the narratives suggesting that this is a game that Oklahoma should win running away? And, if you start to sleepwalk, odds are you get burned. And, maybe Kansas isn't the kind of team that's going to capitalize on that opportunity. Maybe Texas Tech isn't the kind of team. But Baylor is the type of team, especially with who they have on that coaching staff. They're a type of team that will be opportunistic if you give them any margin. And so for Oklahoma, the onus is very much on them to come out strong on Saturday and beat Baylor soundly. And I think they should. I think they will. I don't see any reason why it doesn't happen. But to be clear, John, yes, there is a very real possibility that this becomes a trap game for Oklahoma if they don't come out and put the pedal to the metal right away.
Mm-hmm. Baylor lost so many good players off that defense, as I mentioned. I mean, James Lynch, Bravion Roy, Graylin Arnold, and then a couple weeks back, their best player this year, Terrell Bernard, went down with an injury. But Jalen Petrie has been out. He's just been terrific. Got some compliments from Lincoln Riley on Monday, singled out as having a great year. Dylan Doyle is another linebacker on that team. Been very productive, very reliable this season. JT Woods, the defensive back, has 3 picks. So I think the Baylor team's got a long way to go. They're in full rebuild mode, don't get me wrong, but they're 5th in the Big 12 in total defense, 6th in scoring defense, 2nd in pass defense, 3rd in pass efficiency defense. And Parker, I think I see good things coming from Dave Aranda and his crew, especially when you think about the offensive side of the ball. Charlie Brewer, coming off so many concussions, he played the game of his life. R.J. Sneed, the wide receiver, played out of his mind the other day. And as I mentioned, Tristan Ebner is just all over the field. This team's got talent. Something to concern yourself with if I'm an Oklahoma fan. Anyway, I'm just saying. Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, Robert Anthony Stoops. Hey, are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman or a car dealership in Oklahoma City or a restaurant in Edmond, or maybe you're a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise and you just want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Well, then consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day, and the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. To advertise, send an email to allsoonersi@gmail.com or DM us on Twitter at all_Sooners. Follow SI Sooners on Twitter, all_Sooners. Find Parker at Parker Thune, Thune. I'm at John E. Hoover. Website is allsooners.com. We're a Fan Nation affiliate, still part of the Sports Illustrated Network, by the way. Our content is free. You guys know that. No memberships, no subscriptions, no credit cards. Just click and enjoy. Find the video version of this here podcast on my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. And remember, I need your help. If you're watching us there, this channel that you're watching us on, probably, unless you're already watching the new one. This channel, though, is probably going away pretty soon. All my stuff on the YouTube channel is going to be over here at this channel. So jump over there real quick and please subscribe. Need your help. Okay, Parker, we teased it. He's back. Bob Stoops has entered the chat room. He's out there on the practice field this week. He's helping out Lincoln Riley and the guys. First of all, yeah, it's a cool story, sure. Future Hall of Fame coach. He's out there as an assistant, lending a hand. We all wrote about it yesterday. If you want more, check out allsooners.com. Bob's actual title now is Special Assistant to the Athletic Director, right? So Joe Castiglione dialed him up. Lincoln Riley dialed him up and said, hey, Bob, need your help. Today we got pics of Bob out there in his warm weather gear, masking up, of course, had a headset on so he could listen in and kind of catch up, I'm assuming. He also had a little piece of paper in his hand, probably some kind of cheat sheet. I thought that was pretty cool. But Parker, let's start with the obvious. I'm just going to throw the dots out there and maybe let's let the listener connect them. We have gotten a Zoom call with Alex Grinch every Wednesday this season when the Sooners have a game, and we didn't get to talk to Alex this week. Didn't get to talk to him today. Last week it was Thanksgiving week, so they pushed Alex up to Tuesday. We didn't get it. Didn't get him at all this week. So we know that the coaching staff was hit hard by COVID. Apparently turned up some positive tests. That's what Lincoln said. So, no, I don't think Bob Stoops will be coordinating the defense this week. Exactly. But I get the sense that Alex Grinch may be absent on Saturday night, Parker. Again, no confirmation here. We're not sitting here reporting this, but I'm just saying. What do you think?
Well, Lincoln Riley did say that Bob Stoops may be on the sidelines on Saturday, so let's not rule anything out at this point, John. And to be honest, I would love that because Bob Stoops stepped down as head coach at Oklahoma 2 months before I arrived and matriculated. And so I've never witnessed Bob Stoops on the sidelines for the Oklahoma Sooners, at least in my 10 years as a college student. I can say definitively that I've never been to an Oklahoma game that Bob Stoops has coached at. So that would be fun for me personally. But you very much hit the nail on the head, John. And I think I don't want to jump to any conclusions as far as connecting the dots, but obviously Alex Grinch not available to media, Bob Stoops returns. Maybe you say, okay, well, if Alex Grinch doesn't have COVID, I think it's pretty clear that there is a good portion of the defensive staff, and Lincoln Riley did mention, he didn't say who, but he did mention that one particular area of the staff was hit pretty hard by COVID-19. And so, for whatever reason Alex Grinch is quarantining, I think this is the reason why we've seen Bob Stoops out on the practice field this week for Oklahoma. And to be honest, I would not be surprised at all if he was on the sidelines on Saturday, because we know how rigorous and how scrupulous Oklahoma has been with regards to contact tracing. So even if Alex Grinch isn't COVID-19 positive right now, they may have him quarantined as a contact trace through the weekend and say, hey, Bob Stoops, why don't you put on the headset, put the visor back on, and roam the sidelines once again on Saturday night. That would be, John, I'm having to curb my enthusiasm because that's just the kind of thing that would be so fun to watch. There's no other word. It's just fun because Bob Stoops is a legend. He's an icon. It's not going to be anything close to a permanent thing, but wouldn't it just be so 2020 if this pandemic that won't go away, compelled one of the greatest head coaches of his era in college football to return to the sidelines for a single game to coordinate the defense of the school that he coached for 18 years as a one-off, and the only reason it's possible is because the university had the foresight, if you can call it that, to keep him on institutional staff as a special advisor? I mean, if that's not the most 2020 thing we've heard all year, I don't know what is, John.
Yeah, and I'm not putting it out of the realm of possibility that he could not coordinate or that he could coordinate the defense. It's a lot of responsibility for a guy who literally hasn't coordinated a defense since like late November 1998. Think about that. He's been involved, obviously, in a lot of game plans over the years at OU, but he's not been the signal caller of the defense. He's probably helped construct some game plans, but he's not been the guy who goes out there on game day and says, 6-2 stack monster, 6-2 stack monster, ready break. You know what I mean? He's not the guy that's out there calling the signal. So it could get interesting. What if he goes out there and he's the defensive coordinator and they pitch a shutout? What if they shut out Baylor? Oh, my God. What a storyline we would have, probably for not just this year, but the entire offseason. We would write and talk and visit about it multiple times. Before we get too deep into that, though, let's lay out the succession, Parker, of how Oklahoma's defense might actually operate if Bob is not calling the signals. I mean, so maybe Grinch is out, maybe, right? Grinch makes all the calls. Lincoln said they have multiple contingencies in place, but let's look at it. To me, this is kind of concerning if I'm an OU fan. You got Calvin Thibodeau, who's been here the longest, obviously, on the defensive staff, but he's basically the defensive tackles coached and has never called defense. Brian Odom and Roy Manning are in their second year. They're strictly position coaches, and they've never called a defense. Jamar Cain is in his first year. He's basically the defensive ends coach, and he's never called a defense. So assuming Bob is not the defensive coordinator, he might be, but assuming he's not, how much of a concern is it if Alex Grinch can't be there?
I don't know if it's that much of a concern just given who the opponent is, John, because this isn't a Baylor team that's going to score at an astounding clip, right? You might be worried about it if you were going up against a team like Texas Tech or TCU that has some offensive firepower, and if you don't bring your A game on defense, they got a chance to beat you. But for me, if I'm the Oklahoma Sooners right now, I would much rather have Alex Grinch out this week than probably any other week of the year except for Kansas, simply because Baylor is a team that if they're going to beat you, they're going to beat you in a 20-17 kind of game rather than a 48-45 type of game. Lincoln Riley's offense is going to put up points on Saturday, more than enough points to win them a football game. So if there's a week that Alex Grinch had to miss at some point because of a positive test or a contact trace or whatever the situation is, this is about as good as it gets. And I'm not super concerned that even if Grinch isn't on the sidelines on Saturday, the Sooners are going to be just fine on the defensive side of the football.
Now, by all accounts, I think, we would agree, Lincoln Riley, what we've heard this week, he's going to be there on Saturday night, okay? I asked him point blank yesterday, Lincoln, you haven't tested positive, have you? And he looked at the OU backdrop behind him and said, no, this is not my living room. I'm on campus, which means I haven't tested negative. So, but he said he's getting more anxious as the season drags on. Every time he takes a test, he gets more and more anxious. But he's going to be there, as far as we know, unless he comes down with COVID in the next couple of days or something. He's going to call plays, as usual, right? And Parker, that is huge, having Lincoln Riley call plays, because he may be coming up with contingencies and he may be coming up with backup plans to backup plans, that kind of thing. But he might literally be the most important coach in the country when it comes to game day operations, because I mean, there's still a few head coaches that are play callers. Don't get me wrong. There's I don't know, a dozen or so, maybe a couple dozen. But when you see Ryan Day has to sit out this week, okay, Kevin Wilson is Ohio State's offensive coordinator. He calls the plays. He's been calling plays for years, and Kevin has been a head coach. So he knows he would know exactly what to do if Ryan Day has to miss this week's game against Michigan State. So when you see a guy like Nick Saban, he's got to sit out a week, or last week. Steve Sarkisian is their offensive coordinator at Alabama. And you know what? Sark's been a head coach before. So if Lincoln were to have to sit out, seriously, for me, that's a problem. That's a huge problem, because Lincoln Riley is the Oklahoma offense, and the Oklahoma offense is Lincoln Riley. It comes from his mind, but it also kind of comes from his gut. The guy approaches play calling, and I'm saying this as warmly and friendly and kindly as I can. He approaches play calling like an artist. You can copy an artist, right? You can try to draw what an artist draws or paint what an artist paints, but you have no shot at ever being that artist, because it's personal. It comes from somewhere inside. I don't know, not to get too all existential on you, but tell me who's going to flip open that little one-page play sheet and make it work like Lincoln. Is it Cale Gundy? He's, co-offensive coordinator, receivers coach. Bill Bedenbaugh, he's the co-offensive coordinator, runs the run game. Those guys are obviously essential, I think, in creating the game plan. They've never actually called plays. Shane Beamer has never actually called plays. Dennis Simmons has never actually called plays. Again, this isn't something anybody has to worry about, Parker, this week, right? We think that Lincoln's going to be there. We're pretty sure Lincoln's going to be calling plays, but man, just lay it out for us. What a nightmare that would be if OU if Lincoln Riley missed a game.
Well, Lincoln Riley's the straw that stirs the drink, right, John? I don't think anybody would question that. If there's one guy that the Oklahoma Sooners cannot afford to lose, it's Lincoln Riley. And I'll tell you what, if you recall last week, the Denver Broncos played a football game against the New Orleans Saints with 0 quarterbacks. They literally rolled out a practice squad wide receiver who played a little bit of quarterback in college to take the snaps. I think he ended up completing 1 pass in the game. So clearly, this pandemic has seen some things and created some things on the football field that are unprecedented. But still, I think Oklahoma would be in a far better position should their entire quarterback room go down, honestly, than they would be if Lincoln Riley weren't at the helm. Because honestly, the Sooners could throw the ball on every play or run the ball on every play on offense for an entire game and probably be just fine. That's how much talent they have in both facets of the offense. But you lose a guy with the creativity and the football acumen of Lincoln Riley, yeah, that's cause for concern, especially when as you mentioned, John, there's nobody else on that staff that's ever called plays. So it's one thing if you got a guy in your back pocket that's an assistant on staff that's been an offensive coordinator before, or at least has play calling experience. Oklahoma doesn't. It's all on Lincoln Riley's shoulders. So protect Lincoln Riley at all costs. That's what it comes down to, John.
Yep. I'll tell you what they'd do. They'd roll Mikey Henderson out there at quarterback. We're going to talk about Mikey Henderson in the next segment, which is coming up next on the Sooners podcast, though. First, we got tomorrow, man. Basketball tomorrow, unless it's not.
Hey there, loyal listeners. Parker Thune here with SI Sooners. Are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman, or a car dealership in Oklahoma City, or a restaurant in Edmond. Or maybe you're just a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise, and you want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day, and the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. To advertise, send an email to allsoonersi@gmail.com or send us a direct message on Twitter at @all_Sooners.
Final segment of the SI Sooners podcast. Man, Parker, forget Santa Claus. UTSA's coming to town tomorrow night. Basketball in the Lloyd Noble Center. Unless, of course, it's not. Unless, of course, COVID. Parker, Lon Kruger said the team's excited. They've been working hard, all that good stuff. But frankly, he said they're not They've not been practicing together. They're coming off a week literally in which they didn't do anything. A week of quarantine. Absolutely nothing. So Lon Kruger, veteran of like a million college basketball games, still does not know what he has on this team, which would just drive me up the wall if I could not see my guys practice and scrimmage and play games. But you know what? At least they got a game tomorrow night against UTSA before they jump into Big 12 conference play on Sunday at TCU, Parker.
Yeah, well, here's what you got to take into account, John. The Sooners have two guys on this roster that are sure things, right? Brady Manick and Austin Reeves, the two seniors. Those guys are going to get theirs night in and night out. So you hope, heading into this contest with UTSA on Thursday, you hope that those guys are able to bring their A game and put some points on the board, because you don't know what you're going to get from the rest of your roster necessarily, but you can say with some degree of certainty that Brady Manick and Austin Reeves are going to put up 20-25 apiece if they're on their game. And the reality of the situation, John, is that nobody really knows what they're working with. That's why we've seen such ridiculous upsets across college basketball thus far this season. We just watched Richmond beat Kentucky, for instance. This is not the kind of thing that happens. San Francisco beat Virginia. That was the other one, the other big upset that was sitting in the back of my mind there. But it's just going to be chaos for probably the next 2 months across college basketball, if not longer, as people, as coaches, rather, try to figure out what they're working with, what their lineups should look like, how they can rotate their players in and out. And also, there's no guarantee that teams don't have a stretch of 2-3 weeks where they don't play a single game at all, just due to COVID-19, whether that's a number of contact traces or an outbreak of positive tests within the program. There's no sure thing in this 2020-21 basketball season, John. And so, like I said, more than anything else, I think Lon Kruger is going to have to lean on those two seniors in Brady Manick and Austin Reeves, because those are the two guys that he knows are going to show up on any given night and give him solid production. So it's a lot on their shoulders, and it's a lot on the shoulders just in general across college basketball of guys that have experience. And that's increasingly a rare thing, right, John? When we see so many talented basketball players go one and done. We see so many guys leave early for the NBA draft. The really elite players that are experienced, upperclassmen, are hard to come by. And I think Oklahoma has two of those guys in the college basketball atmosphere in Manick and Reeves. So I think they're in a better position, quite honestly, than a lot of other teams are. But still, you're going to need some other guys to come along and fall into place alongside Manick and Reeves and be able to make a difference, whether that's on the boards or through scoring or through distributing. You're going to need some guys to step up. And you look at the transfers, Elijah Harkless, Mo Gibson, maybe those are the guys. You look at some of the guys that got significant minutes last year in Alondis Williams and Davion Harmon and Jalen Hill. You don't necessarily need all of them to bring it right off the bat, but it would be nice if one or two of them were to have consistently good nights for the first few games this season, just as you kind of get your feet underneath you.
Yeah. Now, the irony is they were supposed to have UTSA come in last week. Well, that got canceled. Well, now UTSA has played 2 games, okay? They were supposed to play last week when nobody had played any games. Well, now OU hasn't played, and UTSA's got 2 under their belt. The Roadrunners played UT Permian Basin, which is a Division II program, and UT Rio Grande Valley, which is a Division I program. Rio Grande is coached by Lou Hill, who coached on Kruger's staff at OU with Steve Henson, who's now the coach at UTSA. So, yes, we've come full circle. And Lon will be hosting Steve, of course, on Thursday. OU wins the game Thursday if they play, of course. I think that's kind of a given. I think they're better than UTSA regardless. I think OU's going to roll. They've got better ability. A lot of times I think what you see a lot in basketball, especially early in the season, is that teams kind of figure things out as they go. You know, they build chemistry, they figure out their identity. That's going to happen to the nth degree with this Oklahoma team. But right now, they're just going to have to win some games with ability, Parker. So let's talk some more football. OU didn't move in the college football playoff rankings this week. But Iowa State did. They jumped the Sooners to number 9, OU State at number 11. The committee is basically, to me, they're dangling it out there. They're like saying whoever wins the Big 12 has got an outside shot, a small shot, but at least a shot at the playoff. What say you?
Well, a couple things to take note of here, John. One, I think this was best case scenario for Oklahoma. If they weren't going to rise, let Iowa State be the one to rise, right? Because the most that Oklahoma was going to pick up in all likelihood was one slot, because Northwestern, which was ranked number 8, lost. So if the Sooners weren't going to move into the top 10, their best case scenario was for Iowa State to move into the top 10. Get the Cyclones as highly ranked as possible before you presumably head to Jerry's World on December 19th for the grudge match. And so if there's a team that Oklahoma would have liked to have been leapfrogged by in this week's poll, it's Iowa State. Also of note, Oklahoma State jumped up 8 spots in the poll this week. That's a big feather in Oklahoma's cap when you're talking about a resume. And look, I don't want anybody to be operating under the assumption that Oklahoma is going to make the college football playoff, because that is a very, very slim chance at this point, almost non-existent. But it doesn't hurt them in any capacity should such a scenario come to fruition where Oklahoma actually has a chance at year's end to be compared alongside some of the other contenders in the college football playoff race for a number 4 seed. It does not at all hurt to have Oklahoma State as high in that poll as they could possibly be.
Yeah, and I've said it before. I'm 99% of the time, I'm one of those guys that says, hey, better to be in the playoff than outside the playoff. I think this year might be the exception. You don't want to be the 4th seed. We've talked about this before, going against an Alabama team that has no flaws, coming off a 63-28 blowout beat down against LSU in the Peach Bowl. You don't want to have to taste that again with a young team like this one is, like a young, unproven, you don't want guys to get out there and start doubting themselves. Get into another bowl, a New Year's Six bowl, a really attractive bowl, a prestigious bowl that you can hang on the wall, and beat some inferior team and say, yeah, we were bowl champs. We could have made the playoff that year. That's what you want out of this 2020 season. You don't want to go into the playoff and be forced to play in some, the Sugar Bowl against Alabama as the 4 seed. No, not this time. You can't win it if you're not in it. I get it. But there's sometimes, some years, on the rare occasion, that you don't want to be in it. You literally do not want to be in it. You're just not equipped. And I think this team is still a year away from being there. A little more about the website. We had a couple of stories just today, man. We got the H-backs covered today, Parker. I wrote a story this afternoon about the return of Braden Willis, who has spent the last 5 games, tweeting. But he came back for the Oklahoma State game, looked really good. Obviously, it means a lot to him to be back on the field. I wrote a story about Braden. Check it out, allsooners.com. And then, Parker, you wrote today about Mikey Henderson, another H-back, freshman. He's a fun guy to watch. Tell us more about him.
John, I'm just waiting for the day when Lincoln Riley logs on to Twitter and sees my tweet from September in which I suggested that he needs an all H-backs package consisting of Jeremiah Hall, Austin Stogner, Braden Willis, Mikey Henderson, and Dane Saltarelli. I just want to see that. Is that so much to ask? For one play, give me 5 H-backs on the field. But no, Mikey Henderson is a guy, and we've talked about him. We've talked about Mikey Henderson a bit, but this is a guy that has come on so strong, so unexpectedly. I don't think anybody would have imagined that the 4th string H-back behind 3 established guys in Stogner, Hall, and Willis was going to have anything close to a significant impact on the offense this year. But Mikey Henderson continues to force Lincoln Riley's hand in giving him more touches and keeping him a part of the game plan, because every time he touches the ball, it seems like he makes a big play. 18 touches on the year, 225 yards, and 2 touchdowns on 7 carries and 11 receptions. He's got a gain of double-digit yards in, I believe, 5 consecutive games now. So this is a guy that, as a true freshman, and he played quarterback in high school, which you mentioned earlier, John, but it wasn't really clear what position he was going to play in Lincoln Riley's offense. It became evident that due to his size and his mobility that H-back was the ideal slot, but I think a lot of people would have anticipated that he had some waiting to do before he was going to see the field. But first game as a collegian, 4 catches for 37 yards against Missouri State, and he's continued to see sporadic action, but with every single opportunity Mikey Henderson gets, I think we're seeing something very similar to what we saw with Marvin Mims over the first 3 games of the season this year. His opportunities don't come around all that often, But when they do, he takes advantage of them to such a degree that you can't help but take notice. And you can't help but give him another opportunity thereafter. And Lincoln Riley said as much when we asked him about Henderson. He said, hey, if he keeps taking advantage of those opportunities, it's going to create more and more opportunities. So Mikey Henderson, as a true freshman, doing some really special things in that H-back room. And I think you got to be really excited with what his ceiling might be once he's an upperclassman and you give him 2 or 3 more years in this system.
You're right. He's fun to watch. Parker, let's leave today's pod with this. December is here. Christmas is coming up. You don't have to get me anything, but this year, a week before Christmas, is National Signing Day. Parker, you're working on a piece about Lincoln Riley's recruiting wish list. I think it's coming up tomorrow, allsooners.com. Without giving away too many secrets now, you think Lincoln Riley's going to have a Merry Christmas, or is he going to get a lump of coal? Preview your story for us tomorrow.
I think National Signing Day is going to be fun if you're a Sooner fan, John, because I think you're getting Savion Byrd. I think you're getting Bryce Foster. I think you're getting Kamar Wheaton. But hey, here's what's important, especially this week, because this is news this week. Emeka Egbuka is coming to Norman. The Sooners are still very much in the running for the top wide receiver in this 2021 cycle. And keep in mind, they've already added Billy Bowman. They've already added Jalil Farouk. They've already added Cody Jackson. They've already added Mario Williams. They have 4 extremely gifted and versatile wide receivers in this signing class already. Egbuka, man, that would be the cherry on top. And I think the popular expectation for quite a while now is that Ohio State is going to land him. But the fact that he's making a trip down to Norman to rendezvous with Caleb Williams and watch the Baylor game on Saturday night would suggest that there is still very much a chance that Oklahoma gets Egbuka. This visit, especially falling 2 weeks before National Signing Day, simply does not make sense unless he's still evaluating Oklahoma as a very legitimate option. So that is something to be encouraged by, probably the thing to be encouraged by, at least in terms of recruiting this week for the Sooners.
Listen to the SI Sooners podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts, or on your Amazon-enabled device. Just say, Alexa, play the SI Sooners podcast. Or go to allsooners.com, click on the player, and listen on your phone, your tablet, or your computer. And you can always watch the video version on my YouTube channel. That's John Hoover Media. For Parker Thune, I'm John Hoover. See you guys.